we're going to have Alex Svetsky come up to the stage. He's going to take 5 minutes, talk about Bitcoin, and then hand it off to a keynote speaker.
Thank you, Tone. Yeah, it's impossible.
He gets 25 minutes tomorrow.
I only found out that I was introducing some Italian guy this morning, and I don't know, this Italian guy. I first heard him actually on Tone's podcast, and I was like, this accent, I can't get it out of my head, and it's funny. It's so pervasive that even when I read tweets from this guy, I read them in an Italian accent. And so, from what I understand, his talk, where's the topic of the talk? It was supposed to be something, but apparently it's been changed to Bitcoin cultures. And this actually apparently stems from a podcast that he and I did. In fact, Giacomo wrote a piece. If you haven't noticed yet, his name is Giacomo, this Italian guy. Say what? The spoiler alert, yeah, apologies. He actually wrote a piece for the Bitcoin Times, which is a publication that I do once a year. And his piece was called Bitcoin and the Hop Cycle. So if you don't know the name, you probably know the sequence, which is strong men create good times create weak men create bad times create strong men. So he wrote an incredible little piece for that article. For that publication, and we followed that up with a podcast in which we just had this discussion, as weird people do, and we recorded ourselves and we put it live, and in there we explored the nature of the kind of person who seems to gravitate towards Bitcoin and actually understands Bitcoin, because you've got people who are like, I'm a Bitcoiner, but buy my shitcoin. You've got these Bitcoiners from Silicon Valley who, believe that Soylent is like the path to, health, and in the process grow fucking man boobs. You've got these other ones who are like, libertarians who believe in freedom and shit, and they believe in the freedom to scam you out of your Bitcoin. So you have all like these different camps of people that come into Bitcoin, and most of them, if they're kind of too squarely in one camp, they're completely fucking retarded. And we were trying to figure out like where the Venn diagram is of people who actually become Bitcoiners. And my assumption is that a lot of you in here kind of fit in that Venn diagram. I'm sure there's a few retards here as well, but we will cleanse you of your retardedness. So anyway, without further ado, I am going to bring up this Italian guy who I'm very skeptical of, but apparently he's a good speaker. And he's going to tell you more about Bitcoin cultures.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't have such a strong accent. It's okay, it's normal. Okay. So Alex just reminded you about the origin of this talk, of this discussion that was in this podcast with him. After this discussion with him, a guy on Twitter created a Venn diagram trying to follow up our discussion about intersecting, overlapping Bitcoin cultures. And then I made a promise to Odonaut, and I told the guy, I will write an article about this topic for Citadel 21. And I will, but that was 4 years ago. So sorry. I still haven't written the article, but there is a presentation at least. So maybe Citadel 21, you could just link to the video of the presentation and I'm done. Okay, so let's start with the idea of multidisciplinarity of Bitcoin. So in order to really understand Bitcoin, in order to really get Bitcoin, you need to understand a few different things. It's not enough to understand just one. If you don't understand at least at a very high level the others, it's likely that you will miss some of the characteristics of the features and of the value of Bitcoin. So, of course, you need engineers to understand Bitcoin. Even if you are somebody coming from a non-technical field, over the last months of years or any amount of time after you started to fall in the rabbit hole, you started to learn good engineering, security practices, open source code, the importance of understanding. Even if you hear people talking about hardware wallets, you may not understand a thing about the electronics of a secure element, but you have to start to at least understand, to distinguish between people who are just bullshitting and people who are making sense. So you need a very high-level understanding of engineering, and if you don't have that, you will fall for any kind of pseudo-technological scam, which is, the crypto industry is full of that. Then you need revolutionaries. If you approach Bitcoin just as a technology, you will really miss its significance and you will not understand what people are doing. If the only point is just to make cool software, to make a cool, there is this meme, right, which is the Indian guy with the golden chain, I'm in for the technology. And the meme is funny because the guy is obviously in for the money, but even being in for the technology itself, so there is a meta meme, even the guy making fun of the guy who is not there for the technology, he doesn't understand Bitcoin as well, because Bitcoin is not a technology. The technology is just functional to the aim of Bitcoin. And the aim is highly political in a sense. It's apolitical because it's non-partisan, but it's political in the sense that it's going to separate the politics from money from state and so money from politics. So it is highly political, and you need to understand revolutionaries in order to understand Bitcoin. Otherwise, you don't understand why most developers do what they do, why most of the activists of Bitcoin educators do what they do. They are not really just playing around with the technology. They are on a mission. They are on a crusade. It's more than that. And then you have to understand speculators. And I don't mean that just in the sense of, degenerate gamblers. Oh, I don't know if I can say that in Las Vegas. I mean, gamblers. And I also mean that in a very noble sense of Mises, of Ludwig von Mises. Everybody is a speculator. Everybody is going to actually speculate on the future, trying to give up some scarce resources in exchange for other scarce resources with opportunity cost calculation. So everybody is literally a speculator. People actually pump and dumping shitcoins is a little bit more speculative than others, but everybody is a speculator. And you don't understand Bitcoin if you completely ignore the economical incentives and the financial incentives. For example, if you are just an engineer, you may say, okay, now we have side chains, so you people can just stop printing shitcoins. I mean, it's useless at the point. From a technological point of view, your technological goal can be satisfied in Bitcoin only, so just stop printing shitcoins. And they won't stop. Why? Because there is an whole other point to understand, which is the point of speculation, the point of economic incentives. Bitcoin will not be where it is if not for the number go up meme, if not for the money. So many people are entering for the gambling and staying for the revolution or for the technological advancement. So it is a gateway for people, the speculation, and it is important. You cannot really ignore the price. You can pretend the price is not important. Price is really important. Otherwise, Bitcoin will not be where it is. So this is what you need to know in order to understand. And we were discussing with Alex that you need to be at the very center of this triangle in order to really get the totality of Bitcoin. You may not be deep into any of these fields, but you need to get a little bit of all of them. So the funny thing is that if you analyze the cultural roots of Bitcoin, so the origins of Bitcoin, the subcultures that generated Bitcoin, that actually played a role in Bitcoin development, you will understand that the culture were not really dividing themselves in this clean way, in these circles, but they were actually coming from the intersection. The very first culture which actually worked on Bitcoin we call them the cypherpunks. These people in the 90s, they were all about privacy, privacy on speech, of transaction, private communication over the internet. Julian Assange was one of them. Adam Beck was one of them. They were cool people. They were revolutionaries. Their purpose was not purely technical. They were not just playing around with cool tech. They were actually trying to organize a social revolution. The whole point was what is called crypto-anarchism, which is basically, we cannot really achieve anarchism right now because the state has guns and we have not, but when we are online, we can achieve a level of privacy that can make difficult and expensive for the state to hurt us for what we do. So we can achieve some kind of freedom inside the cyberspace, even if we don't have that kind of freedom outside the cyberspace. So cypherpunk ideology and crypto-anarchism and stuff like that. So after Satoshi, we don't know who they were or he was, but we know that most likely he were part of the cypherpunk cultural environment. But then you had basically a handover, then you started to have engineers. They may not really share a lot of the political motives, but maybe some engineers that were coming from Google. You remember the guy who caused the 2013 chain split, Mike Hearn. He was coming from Google. It was a Silicon Valley type. Then he went back to the fiat world, which is where he belonged. But for a moment, Bitcoin was developed by people that were coming from this other subculture that I would call it the culture of the disruptors. They are the typical Silicon Valley type. Alex mentioned them. They are the guys that they drink Soylent, they disrupt the world, they create the new cool software, they pitch their startup to you in the elevator, even if you want to get out. They're this kind of people. I mean, it's good because we need them as well. Without the business model, you don't have incentives to play around. So having startuppers in Bitcoin is good. But it's also cringe-worthy sometimes. As like I remember in 2013, 2014, it was full of these people coming to pitch the new blockchain startups. So it is a little bit cringe, but it's also useful for the overall result. And then after, so Bitcoin started as a revolution. Then it progressed as a cool technology to disrupt the banking system. And then people started to reconsider seriously the Austrian perspective. So what is money? What is scarcity? What is time preference? And then you have Saifedian with the Bitcoin Standard Book, and everybody is discussing these topics and store of value and saving and basically storing my time and time preference and stuff like that. So this is not really something which, there is this narrative that this stuff arrived in Bitcoin later on. This is not correct. Even inside the cypherpunk movement, there was people like Nick Szabo actually thinking about this very discussion, these very topics about how is money being selected from society based on durability, on scarcity, on unforgeable costliness and stuff like that. So there was a lot of Austrian debate at the beginning of Bitcoin, but it came out mainstream later. Even here, like on this stage, Saifedian was speaking about these topics a few years ago, and that was very important for Bitcoin as well. And still, you cannot really forget the other parts in order to understand the full picture. So it's a real complex interplay of different topics. What is interesting is that this subdivision, which is the subdivision of the original ancient subcultures merging into the Bitcoin culture, is also right now somehow visible in the division of meme tribes. If you go, for example, on Twitter and you check out what we do mostly on Twitter, which is just Twitter fights among Bitcoiners. So we just fight. So this man is wrong on the internet and I have to stay awake all tonight to fight with him. That's what we do, basically. And if you actually analyze the topics of discussion, the reasons for our wars, you will find that there are some tribes in Bitcoin today, and these tribes are still basically, kind of, with some exception, at the intersection of these circles. So one tribe is the NGU tribe. So it's the number go up. So just like following the Austrian economic school consideration, they focus on price. They focus on central bank adoption, nation-state adoption. They focus on halving cycles. They focus on store of value. They focus on HODL. They will use memes like HODL, and they will say to the moon, and they will put on laser eyes. And they will also, I mean, some of them are anarchists, like I am, but they will also tolerate a head of state if the head of state has Lazarus, like Nayib Bukele. So, I mean, you're not perfect, you're still a politician. I hate you, but I also love you because you have Lazarus. So there is some level of tolerance. Then you have the other guys that are like, these are hardcore street breeding Bitcoiners, and I would like to call them, just to use an acronym, the no KYC guys. This is also very important for Bitcoin. You know, KYC, know your customer, is absolute economic illiteracy. It's basically ignorance. So the point of money is that you don't have to know your customer. If you own a bookshop, the point of money is that the client, the customer, has to know that you have good books in order to come to buy books from you. So he has to know you. Even if you give them the book, they have to know that it's not actually just a brick covered as a book. They have to trust the vendor. But the vendor cannot trust any single customer. Otherwise, the business could not scale. The whole point of money is that the vendor should not know his customer. So every time you hear about KYC, you know that you're speaking with absolutely ignorant people about any kind of economic interaction. Knowing your customer is exactly the antithesis of the idea of money. So there is a lot of people that is very actively fighting against this idea of buying Bitcoin on KYC solutions and leave your private information inside the list that get transmitted across tons of chain analysis companies and government agency. So you remember when, this is just a little bit off topic, but you remember where people started to freak out because they were buying Ledger devices, and the list of Ledger customers, it leaked. And so now some people, some bad people, they had the list with your address, maybe home address, delivery address anyway, and the fact that you just had another wallet. That was enough to get people into problems with phishing attacks, some other people with blackmailing attacks, and even some few, luckily, physical attacks. So if a list just containing your address and the fact that you bought another wallet is dangerous, imagine a list which contains your name, full name, legal up-to-date document, and verified home residency, and address of withdrawal, and exact amount of withdrawal. And that gets shared not just by one company, like Ledger, but it gets shared across different state agencies, and eventually it finds its way to the dark web and to everywhere, basically. So KYC sucks. KYC is actually a huge danger for your personal security. And these people, they like to remind it to you, and they are the people that actually were very focused about on darknet market. They are all about free ROS, and they were users of the Silk Road. I was a user of the Silk Road just for research purposes, of course. And this is important. I mean, this is a whole side of internet privacy. These guys, they are different. They have different memes. They don't like Lazarus. They don't like. Well, not all of them, of course. There is an intersection, right? I may be at the center and be part of both, and I consider myself part of both. But most of these guys, if they are outside of the center, they will not like Lazarus or Moons. They will dress up as samurais for some reason. They will use these katanas, and they will talk about all these samurai terms. And they will also the typical guys that they will, the actually guy. Like, I mean, actually, you don't really own Bitcoin if you just keep them on an exchange. Okay, sure, let me keep it out to my address. Actually, if you don't run a node, you're just trusting somebody else with your privacy, so you should run a node. Okay, yeah, let's just maybe buy an embassy from Star9 Labs. Actually, if you don't really compile the code yourself, I mean, they could just give you any kind of backdoor inside that embassy, which is, I mean, it's true, it's okay. So let me compile everything from scratch. And then you get Luke Dasher, which actually the compiler of Rust is not compiling Rust itself, so it could be backdoor by the NSA. So that's true. So eventually you end up mining silicium directly from the ground to build your chips, and that's what basically where you end, which is fine. I mean, it's always a trade-off between UX and security, right? So if you want to mine from the earth your metal to build your computer, you can. And then you have the intersection of the people just discussing DeFi. You may think that all these people are just shitcoiners, but that's not the case. There are some legit Bitcoiners interested in advancing strange, crazy, complex functionalities on top of Bitcoin. We were discussing a little bit in the previous panel about, like Justin was saying, something which I agree with, kind of, that monetary functions are basically enough, and they are very important. And if you get them right, you don't need a lot of the other stuff around. But still, there is a lot of people which was fascinated by the idea of having DeFi and DLC contracts with oracles and DEXs and Lightning Network Layer 3 and Sphinx chat on top of Lightning and all these other kind of things, which can be done in a scammy way or also in a serious way. So this is the thing. So I told you that it's not all about shitcoins, the DeFi, but that's true for all of these intersection. There are some part of this chart that tend to be more shitcoin friendly. Mostly, you will have basically these two intersections. The no KYC the tribe. They tend to to answer any question about privacy with just use Monero. You know them, right? You can see them in chats. There are many. Actually, they're not that many, but they use a lot of Telegram and Twitter accounts. And they come on this chat, and you say like, I don't know, this guy consolidated addresses after CoinJoin, so you could de-anonymize him. And they answer just use Monero. And I think this is becoming very noisy and very problematic for this different reason, but we will discuss that. And then on the DeFi side, of course, you have the king of shitcoins, Ethereum, where the mother of all shitcoins. And there's a lot of, there is a lot of discussion about Bitcoin cannot do this. Right now, every Ethereum guy using MetaMask was just shut down by Infura if they were from the wrong country. But still, you can do Turing complete stuff. So it's okay. Then you also have like many libertarians, like in the Pork Fest, they like Bcash for some reason, probably historical because of Roger Ver and stuff. So many people were very libertarian. They are in the Bcash scam. And of course, then you have the pure speculators. This guy here, they don't give a fuck about anything. They just want money. And so, dogs, cats, I don't care. I just want to buy, pump, and dump, and that's all I care for. Which, it tends to drive them to shitcoinery. These guys, the Austrian guys, so these guys here, these are basically the pure engineers. They only care for tech, and they may fall for especially academic scams. For example, the Algorand scam, and usually they will talk about blockchains. This part, the Austrians, they are kind of okay, even if I would argue that a strictly KYC only Bitcoin is actually a shitcoin. This is basically a discussion about protocol. So your Bitcoin protocol, your Bitcoin node follows certain rules. And the rule is if you receive a valid Bitcoin transaction following the protocol, the transaction is valid and you should accept it. And you should broadcast it. And that's the rule of Bitcoin. If you insert any additional rule which restricts the space of valid transaction, you are soft forking away from Bitcoin consensus. You're creating a soft fork, and if you are the only one creating the soft fork, you are basically moving to a shitcoin. So if you don't use your valid Bitcoin node to validate transaction, but if you are imposing an additional layer of rules, like you have to reject transactions which are not coming from some list approved by some government, you are actually soft forking away from Bitcoin consensus into a shitcoin. So they are shitcoiners as well. Some of these people, I block them on Twitter because they are shitcoiners, but that doesn't mean that all the people that are not shitcoiners don't get blocked by me on Twitter, because you can also get blocked if you are too statist for me. And where is this getting, basically? So people were just about, so we discussed this, people that were just about engineering and science, even good engineer, they tend to be okay with any form of tyranny if it's justified by scientific purposes. So, I want to basically enslave you. No, that's bad, that's very backwards. But I want to enslave you for science. Oh, please govern me harder, daddy. So these are this is a tendency in Bitcoin as well, and especially in the engineer camp. Also, engineers tend to be fine with lockdowns because they didn't have a social life anyway, so it's easy for them. So it's not true that any engineers is libertarian. Many of them are pretty statist with the right kind of statism. And then you have revolutionaries. I say that they are revolutionaries. I say that they are activists. They are politically involved. They want to liberate the humankind, but not always with a very consistent political theory about defense of property right and individual freedom. So some of them may tend to be a little bit, dare I say, communist in their misconception of what freedom is and individual rights are. So you can find these kind of guys in the very active political spectrum of Bitcoin or shitcoins or crypto or whatever. And then you have, of course, the compliance guys. These guys, again, they only care for money, so they don't want any kind of inconvenience. They don't want to be inconvenienced in any way. Just regulate me, KYC me, tax me, as long as you let me making money. I don't care about freedom, I don't care about free speech, I don't care about individual rights, property. As long as you allow me to get richer, you can do whatever you want to me or to others. And so these are basically the three tendencies of statism. Cypherpunks, or at least original cypherpunks, or no KYC ninjas, they tend to be better in this regard. They are often shitcoiners, but they are at least not very often statists. So that's actually good. There are three kinds of struggle between these intersections. One is the struggle between a number go up tribe and the DeFi tribe. And usually this fight is about changing Bitcoin. So the number go up tribe, they don't want to add complexity. They don't want to add cool features. They just want to preserve what is working. So just keep Bitcoin working. I don't care for, so I have a good friend who is present in this room, and I will not name names, but this guy is a major respected Bitcoin entrepreneur, and he told me yesterday night that Lightning Network is a shitcoin for him. So this guy is a typical example of somebody who doesn't want crazy stuff on Bitcoin for the sake of it. While there are, so the struggle is let's add cool features and let's keep Bitcoin just money and doing what it does in a perfect way. You may think that in the DeFi camp there may be just evil people, but that's not the case. Like if you talk with super respected cypherpunks like Adam Beck, Adam will actually push for simplicity language in order to do any kind of smart contracts on Bitcoin. So there are good Bitcoin engineers and cypherpunks that actually want to change Bitcoin in very complex ways because they are just more interested in evolution than they are in stability or other kind of things. The second struggle is DeFi versus non-KYC. This is usually a struggle between convenience and UX and security and hardcore security. So just give me my easy. So the DeFi guy will just want adoption. So how can this scale to billions of people? We have to make it simpler. We have to make it easier. We have to make it nicer. And the other guy will say, no, fuck this. You actually have to compile the code from source. And that's the struggle. But then I would like to spend a few minutes on this, which is probably the most important struggle, the struggle where even my friends right now are sometimes fighting on things that I think should not be controversial. And I think both reasons are very important, and we should actually consider them as a whole. And this is basically the no KYC tribe against the number go up tribe. So you will have typically the no KYC guy reminding you the importance of privacy and censorship resistance, and the NGO will just remind you the importance of basically sound economics and institutional adoption and hardest money eating up the softer monies and stuff like that. And this is very important to me because I think they are the two faces of the same coin. If you don't have privacy, eventually you cannot have Bitcoin. Why? Because if the system, if the governments of the world, if the regulatory framework of the world can actually force you to change your Bitcoin consensus into censoring non-KYC transactions or non-whitelisted transaction, then with the same kind of power, it can also force your node to adopt a hard fork changing the 21 million limits. So there is not a scenario in which you change Bitcoin to accommodate for KYC, so they win, and then they don't come after you to ask you to accommodate them for 21 million limit as well. If you introduce KYC, you will be asked to introduce inflation as well. If the State Department of the USA is going to control your UTXO set for terrorists, then the Fed is eventually going to control your UTXO set for monetary policy when you will be threatening the monetary policy. So there is no way you can have a Bitcoin which is regulated and still inflation resistant. Bitcoin is inflation resistant because it is unregulated. Otherwise, you get back to e-gold, which was inflation resistant because it was gold, but then it was just shut down by the government because it was not private and not censorship resistant. So privacy is important. But on the other way, if you don't have sound economics, your privacy coin is just useless. It's worse than useless. It's harmful for people seeking privacy. Why? Because in order to have privacy, you need liquidity. If you have the best privacy tech in the world, but you are the only one using it, you have no privacy. If you have a privacy tech which is less perfect, but it has a large anonymity set, because a lot of people are using it, you have more privacy that using a technology which has a lot of cool features, but cannot be used by more than 10 people. So there is a balance there, and liquidity follows liquidity. So if you have hardest money, Bitcoin will basically eat off the liquidity from the softer money, which is your privacy shitcoin, and your privacy shitcoin will end up to be less private than Bitcoin. Right now, so there are people that say, let's just save Bitcoin, and when I have to pay for my weed, I will use Monero. So what you're doing is, you are saving Bitcoin, then you are sending a transaction from your cold storage to an exchange using Bitcoin anonymity set, which is trackable and whatever. Then you will enter an order book of the exchange, which a very small liquidity, very few people exchanging, so that will be a huge privacy bottleneck, reducing your privacy. Then you will enter a Monero transaction, which even if it has very cool tech, like signature, like a ring signature and confidential transaction, still has usually a lower anonymity set than the typical Bitcoin conjoin. And then the other counterparty will have to do the other way around. So overall, you will reduce your anonymity than just fucking sending Bitcoin immediately without any further ado. Maybe not connecting your IP with an external node and stuff like that. So this struggle is very important. I think that both camps have very good arguments, and I think that they are both right, and they are also both wrong if they don't understand the other side. We literally need both. We need hard money, and we need dark money. Money is not really dark if it's not hard, and the other way around. So, other famous topic, and I'm about to close, just 1 second. So what about eating meat? This is mostly on the Austrian. I noticed that most Austrian people eat meat. And what about guns? It's mostly the no KYC people loving guns. I love both. And I'm not sure where to place poker, actually. So I just place it like that for symmetry, but I'm not sure about that. And the last slide is famous example. So you have, for example, Ragnar is a good guy, but now he's a shitcoiner because it's too far into the no KYC camp. So now he's a shitcoiner. While, for example, you have Matt Oder, who is actually it's not well. Anyway, you have good people that are still Bitcoiners while caring for privacy a lot. At the same time, you have people like Saifedian emphasizing the hard money part a lot, but then you have like Michael Saylor saying that KYC is good, which is not. KYC is bad. KYC is a shitcoin. And then you have people like Eric Wall. I mean, Eric is a friend, but now he's a shitcoiner because he was too much into that field. And then you have Adam Beck promoting a lot of different evolution of Bitcoin. Of course, you can also have perfection. You can have absolute total balance. And I don't know who could be that perfect, but somewhere there is some guy like that. Thank you.
That was awesome. Oh, man.
Okay, so we're going to bring a lot of action items to you in this panel. I really want to get into your guys' brains. And I'm going to separate this into three separate sections. The first one is a little bit of background so we can understand the bias that you have because of your background and what you've experienced in the past. Some current events. There's a lot of really interesting current events that are basically marketing tools for Bitcoin. And the last one is going to be suggestions and advice on some of your favorite Bitcoin companies. We'll talk about places to move, this economic concept of voting with your feet, being able to live where you like the laws. Where do you suggest that people should move to? Because, what's interesting is that Bitcoin does provide financial freedom, but what about personal freedom when you live in a place that is restricting you, right? So first thing, Tone, I'm going to ask the question to you. You grew up in Russia.
Yes.
Okay, so give us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and any parallels you see today between Russia and where you live now in the US.
Yeah, the word Russia has taken on a very different meaning. I think we did a good job not making this event political, even though my channel has been steering in that direction. So, man, a lot has changed. In my lifetime. I'm thinking I still have half my lifetime to go, and a lot more is going to change. It was weird, looking back at it, things are so different. Like when I was a kid in the Soviet Union, you don't feel the communism. You don't feel the fact that you don't own anything. There's no ownership, really. And when you have to leave the country, when we finally got permission to leave the country, Australians, I think, are still working on that, but we eventually got permission to leave the Soviet Union. And when we did that, we were only allowed to leave with $100 per family member. Something around that amount. I mean, $100 per family member bought you a lot more in the late 80s than now, which is like the three ways government confiscates your money, right? Inflation, taxation, or they just take it. And we're seeing all three right now, exponentially increasing. And coming to America, it's great. You now have ownership. You came to capitalism. But 5 or 6 years in middle school plus high school, then 7 years liberal college's education, and suddenly, you're again on that socialist communist mindset until you kind of grow out of it. And now Bitcoin is changing that completely.
So state-run education, very similar to what we're seeing now. Public schools are definitely the norm. And then also this ability for bank accounts to be shut down. Now, Giacomo has a different story because you grew up in Switzerland, correct?
Not really, in Italy.
But you live in Switzerland now.
I live in Switzerland right now.
All right,
yeah.
They both have their own issues, especially if you guys saw the recent news about Switzerland, and we'll talk about that. But how about you growing up? What was that like? And any biases that brought you on to Bitcoin?
So I grew up in Italy, which, for example, recently during this Coro-Nazi situation the last 2 years was even worse than Canada or Australia. I mean, in Italy, you literally had helicopters chasing down people running alone on the streets. You had people basically, a young guy, 17, being dragged by policemen with narcotics and brought away from school because he refused to wear a mask inside the school. So with policemen kidnapping a guy, police entering university in Venice to bring out a girl protesting the mandates. The difference with Canada is that in Italy nobody cares, so there's no struggle to report. So in Canada you have the trackers and you have the confiscation of the track. In Italy nobody cares. They just go along with any kind of dictatorship they have as a traditional habit. So I think it's just national custom to just go along with the dictatorship. So in Italy it was like Italy had I was not in the Soviet Union, so I was in the country of the country west of the Yalta line with the biggest communist party in the history of mankind. So Italy is like the culture of learning how to get along with the communist regime in a soft way, trying to escape that. So when I finished my university, I started to work as an entrepreneur. After a few years as an employee, I started to see on my skin the 78% total tax rate. Tax pressure, 78% on an average including the social, the social security part. And so I moved to Switzerland, which for me was really the land of the free. Switzerland was a place of political decentralization, like financial privacy, sound money also, like Switzerland was the last country to abandon the gold standard. So it was a very conservative country. And just about when I started to move, Switzerland decided to turn into basically Italy 2.0. So I'm considering that maybe I'm the problem, and I'm being very, very cautious about my next moves. But it's still better than Italy, but not as good as.
Don't mess up El Salvador.
Exactly.
Yeah, please. Oh my God. So you guys are both early Bitcoiners. Could you summarize to the audience what idea made it click for you? Because everybody has a different moment where they're like, wow, this stuff is very important.
This one.
Favorite?
Yeah, it happened in 2013 with the Cyprus banking confiscation. It was right there. Unconfiscatability.
For me, just like in the presentation I gave yesterday, it's a fortunate coincidence you asked that. That was the click for me. The fact that it was unifying my interests that were previously completely disconnected. So the week I started to learn about Bitcoin, it was November 2012, and in the same week I was part of this pro-Assange, very like a little bit left-leaning model libertarian group, very pro-privacy, pro-darknet markets, and these guys were actually starting to discuss Bitcoin as black market money. Other guys from the Italian Mises Institute, so Austrian guys, all about gold and monetary policy, no overlap with the other guys. These one were like all the conservative gold bugs, completely different. They told me about Bitcoin the same week. And then I was working at Accenture as a payment technology consultant, and some colleagues started to discuss Bitcoin as a new technology. And so I started to really hear Bitcoin from three completely different, separated parts of my life. And up to that point, my life was being an activist in one group that was despising the other group, and the other way around, and also go to work with this boring stuff about payments, nothing to do with my ethical involvement in advocacy groups. And so for the first time, there was one unifying thread, and that was the click for me.
Yeah, serendipity is very important in a lot of things that I feel like how I live my life as well. You know, I learned about Bitcoin because I campaigned for Ron Paul for his 2012 campaign, and it was because you were around that freedom-minded individuals, and you were like, wow, maybe I don't technically understand this technology, but knowing that the leaders who see the free world in the way that I see it, they agree with this was really that encouragement. So don't feel like you have to understand everything technically in order to take this step forward. And now it's like, you know, all the big banks are getting onboarded, which leads me to our next topic of current events, okay? So in 2020, the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, OCC, said that banks can now custody Bitcoin. One of the big banks that came on board to custody Bitcoin was BNY Mellon, the oldest bank in the United States. I think they manage like $41 trillion, and they're now custodying Bitcoin for their clients. In terms of the future of Bitcoin, how do you guys see this interacting? I mean, there was an argument early on stage where Bitcoin is already a store of value. It's proven that its use case as a store of value is very, very good. But do we see Bitcoin becoming a currency like it was originally supposed to? Or should it become legal tender? Do we want it to become legal tender? What do you guys think?
So Bitcoin already is a store of value and a medium of exchange and a unit of account even. It's just not equally distributed. For example, it's a store of value in many cases for many people just because it's unconfiscatable and it's unprintable, and so it's good for inflation, it's good for taxation, it's good for confiscation, which are the problems right now for everybody, including first world people. While it's a medium of exchange, but it's that only for a subset of people that really need that. For example, if you can pay with fiat, usually because of Gresham law, you pay with fiat. It's like if you're in Venezuela and you can pay with Bolivar instead of dollar, you just thesaurize the dollar and you pay with shitty Bolivars. And you do the same now. I pay with fiat if I can. I tend not to spend Bitcoin, but there are a few transactions that you cannot do with fiat, and that's the whole point. If you want to pay over the internet with privacy, you want to pay a VPN and you don't want to give up your credit card name, then you need Bitcoin. If you want to pay some developer in India and you don't want to go through some Swift super expensive and super slow stuff, you have to pay with Bitcoin. If you want to buy something that your government doesn't want you to buy, which could be a Bible in some Middle East country, or some substance or somewhere, I don't know, you need Bitcoin. Right now, even if you really want to just do something which is not political mainstream, and you get your payment rate censored, you need Bitcoin as a medium of payment, as a medium of exchange. And then Bitcoin is also actually a unit of account, because if you think about that, the correlation between all the shitcoin market and Bitcoin is so strong that it doesn't make sense for a good trader to price a shitcoin in US dollar terms. You have to know what is the opportunity cost for your non-Bitcoin hodling. So what you do is you measure your shitcoin trading performances mostly in Bitcoin. So it is a unit of account too. It's just that these three functions are not really coming into being at the same time. For example, in order to be a medium of exchange, you need also to be a store of value first, because medium of exchange means that medium of exchange is not any object that you can exchange. It's some object that you will exchange and the counterparty will keep it until it will be able to exchange it with another good or service later on. So it's a delayed exchange, and so you need to be a store of value first. And then in order to be a unit of account, you need liquidity, and so you need to be a medium of exchange. So they will take time, but we're getting there.
I'll make mine quick. I'm not a huge fan of regulation that allows bank to custody Bitcoin for people, because it makes people lazy, and they will let banks hold their Bitcoin, which is slightly better than the traditional system. At least the money that the banks are holding for them is not going to devalue. But it's like banks holding your gold. It's still confiscatable, and if the government wants it, they'll take it. So that's the issue.
So for the legal tender question, it's legal tender in El Salvador. I think there's one county in Switzerland that said it could become legal tender. In the United States, do you want Bitcoin to become legal tender?
That's a really hard question. I've gone back and forth on that question a couple of times.
So no answer yet.
I can make an argument for and against. I'm very happy that El Salvador did this because it brought up the conversation. Would I have rather seen El Salvador just start buying up Bitcoin the way Michael Saylor has and not officially make it legal tender? Like, I don't believe that there needs a law. They can just say, we don't care. Like, you can use Bitcoin. You don't have to use Bitcoin. You're not going to be criminally charged. We're treating Bitcoin like a currency, so you're not going to get taxed on it. You're not going to get taxed on Bitcoin, holding Bitcoin, having it go up in value. So it's just there. Like, you don't need a law for or against. It's just there.
Yeah, let's try to break down the concept of legal tender in its constituencies, which is basically three parts. One part is legal tender is when your government accepts that kind of money, that kind of currency for taxes or fines or anything else, and not others. So they create a pressure, they create an artificial demand, because that's what in order to pay taxes to the US government, you need to buy dollar first. So it creates a demand. And this kind of legal tender with Bitcoin is cool. I mean, if like right now in Switzerland, the city of Lugano officially accept Bitcoin for any kind of payment for taxes, fines, or town council services, that's fine. I mean, it's just a criminal organization accepting Bitcoin. I mean, it's okay. It's adoption, right? I don't care if I don't like governments. Like I don't like Cosa Nostra or Camorra or the Chinese triads, but if Cosa Nostra starts to accept Bitcoin, that's kind of adoption. I mean, criminals use oxygen to breathe. That's not a problem for oxygens, right? If it's useful, good people will use it and bad people will use it. The second kind of legal tender is the government forces people to only accept that, or better, they prevent people with violence from refusing that currency as a payment. This is not a good thing. I'm against this kind of legal tender. The only reason I'm not that against in the El Salvador case is that it's fake. Like, if you read the law says everybody's forced to accept Bitcoin if the payer wants to pay in Bitcoin, which almost never happens, And if the guy who accepts Bitcoin is not like impossibilitated because of like lack of infrastructure, which is almost always the case. And if they have infrastructure and the buyer wants to pay in Bitcoin, they can still convert in US dollar immediately using the government infrastructure. So it's a fake legal tender, mostly a marketing move, which is okay. In Switzerland, it's kind of the same. The city of Lugano cannot impose a real legal tender, so they're trying bilateral agreements with the merchants to convince the merchant to accept. This is a good kind of legal tender. It's not really forcing anybody.
Yeah,
and the third one, and I close very quick, the third one is actually is implicit form of legal tender, which is monopoly, basically. They prevent you from using alternatives, which is not the case in this moment. They are not preventing people, like it's not like El Salvador is preventing people from using, exactly.
Yeah, and that's that thing, is that government is this monopoly on force, and they use violence to get compliance. And this is what we love about Bitcoin, is that there is no violence involved. It is an option, just like in El Salvador. Now, one thing that's happened recently in the news is that the EU said that banks are supposed to shut down access to Russian accounts. Now, Switzerland, which is historically known for being neutral, historically known for being the privacy standard for banking, they now made it. And they took that EU regulation a step further, and they now took away people's cryptocurrency accounts that were banking their cryptocurrency in Switzerland. Now, this is in contrast to Coinbase, Binance, Kraken saying, we're not going to shut down accounts to Russia. And for me, I mean, I love that. That's the mindset of our people, right? I might not agree with you, but I'm not God. I don't get to choose what's right or wrong. This is what this technology was made for. Now, given these on-ramp and off-ramp obstacles, what effect do you feel like this has on the future of Bitcoin? And do you guys have suggestions on certain ways that people can obtain Bitcoin without having to touch these on-ramps and off-ramps that do have control?
All right. So I know you're from Switzerland, but I really want to go first on this one. I think this will affect Switzerland a lot more than it's going to affect Bitcoin. I'm still trying to figure out how Switzerland managed to stay neutral and bank everyone throughout the entire World War II. But Facebook and Twitter pressure basically, and probably the US, has made them change everything. Like, you're going to tell me that the World War II situation for 6 years was not as bad as what happened here? So I think it just says a lot more about Switzerland. And Switzerland's going to be in trouble because they really don't understand how they managed to, not get invaded during World War II. And yeah, it's crazy. It's the same thing when they gave up the Swiss numbered accounts. But yeah, I have to stand with Kraken and other companies on this. I mean, this is what. At this point, if the world could cut Russia off from the internet, they would try right now, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm curious what your thoughts on this is.
I agree. I mean, when Binance is more censorship resistant than you, when Binance is more Switzerland than Switzerland, you have a problem, Switzerland. So I think that, when you first submit to blackmail, think about somebody blackmailing you. You give them money the first time, and then there's no way to stop him, basically. It's very unlikely that at a certain point you will say enough is enough. If you bend your knees first, then you will just keep going. And that's what happened with Switzerland. They bent the knee with the US. The US put this kind of embargo, commercial embargo on them to end the bank secrecy for US citizens. And they just bent the knee, and now there is no threshold, there is no line in the sand, there is no place to stop. They will keep submitting and submitting and surrendering and complying. They seem to be resistant to the Coro-Nazi situation at the beginning of 2020, and they basically imposed an even stricter Coro-Nazi rule in 2021. Now they lifted it magically, top down, which is also very bad for Switzerland. Switzerland was used to be something very bottom up with a a very local form of government, with a very decentralized form of power. All the Coronazzi situation, all the COVID restriction came centrally from Bern and disappeared last week centrally from Bern. So it's very centralized right now. It's very non-neutral right now, and I don't think it's getting better. One encouraging signal is that, just like we have seen in Lugano, is that if the central government of Switzerland is going to destroy Switzerland neutrality and Switzerland decentralization and Switzerland law for privacy and some money, maybe some local constituencies like cities and cantons may start to make Switzerland great again. That said, if they fail, as Tom said, Switzerland needs Bitcoin, not the other way around. Bitcoin is the new Switzerland. So,
yeah, and it also shows how the world's always changing. Like, yes, US is a superpower right now. It's not going to stay that way for another 100 years. And Switzerland was known for this. They won't be anymore. It might be El Salvador. Who knows, right? But the world will always change. This is why we would never had a one-world government.
And hopefully we can give you guys some tips on where those places are that are going to become the next G7 countries. But just in terms of, just very directly, any companies, any places you can send people to get Bitcoin on ramps that are not having to subject you to KYC AML?
Well, one is a sponsor here. It's Azteco. It's great. You go with cash in a place, you buy a voucher, and then you buy Bitcoin over the internet. No KYC, nothing. There are some low, let's say, like light KYC platform, right, like Relay or Bitpocket in Switzerland. You pay with a bank account. You don't have to KYC, but you leave traces of your bank account name. So it's a lower level of risk, but still a risk for privacy. So a similar situation with Hodl is an exchange which is non-custodial, so you can buy without KYC.
Yeah, hodl.
Hodl.
Sorry,
yeah.
He has an accent, so I gotta translate for you
Thank
guys.
you for translating.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of Azteco, there's literally money on the floor, right? So there are Azteco envelopes under every seat. So if you haven't gotten one
That's
yet,
not
I missed
KYC.
it.
Yeah, take a
Keep
couple,
one for me,
guys.
please.
And then there's also BISC, BISQ.
Yeah, BISQ is even better because there is no central platform. The only problem is that it's not great for noobs, because in order to buy on BISQ,
Complicated.
you need to have Bitcoin first.
And then I would say that the easiest way is to mine Bitcoin. You get Bitcoin that are clean, and you get it in I would say, slightly different way.
well, look, eventually, as once you start using Bitcoin, you're not going back. I mean, maybe Mike Hearn. There's very few examples. Maybe Roger Ver. Like, once you get on Bitcoin, you're staying there. So as more and more people get on, more and more people are going to pay in Bitcoin. More people are going to want to accept Bitcoin. It'll still spread
when you go orange, you never go back.
Yeah, exactly. It'll still spread.
So talking about current events again, everybody here is politically cognizant, and that's what I really love about the crypto community. So we all know what happened in Canada with the truckers. People donated to a decentralized, people donate to a centralized crowdfunding platform. That list was leaked. That list was so leaked, I have that list of people that donated to this platform, right? Now, what happened is that those people who were Canadians, they got their bank accounts shut down. Now, what do we think about encouraging people to send crypto to war-torn countries? I mean, is this the correct way to go about it? Are we getting scrutiny by governments because of this? And also, like, what happens to those UTXOs when Bitcoin is sent to that wallet? And the thing is, too, is like with Ukraine, I think donations to Ukraine hit an all-time high. Like, how do we know that that money is even going to Ukraine? So I guess the overarching question is, what is your sentiment for people sending money to war-torn countries? And is that also traceable?
So the first question is very difficult to answer because it depends. I mean, how do you know that the money will be used for the declared purposes? You don't know. You have to know people. Bitcoin doesn't fix that. Doesn't at all. You have to know people you are sending money to. You have to verify somehow. So that remains difficult. About traceability, though, it's different. We like to use simple black and white on and off memes like Bitcoin is unconfiscatable because it is untraceable. Of course, reality is all about cost of attacking. The reality is that you can trace Bitcoin even if you use any kind of technology, of privacy technology. If you put a confidential transaction and zero knowledge proof, still, if the government has a camera on your face and your keyboard and your screen 24 hours a day, like in Orwell, there's no privacy, because even if you use Bitcoin with a great technology, they just track you. If they read your mind, there is no privacy. So the point is making spying on you more expensive. So is it possible for a government to target an individual and to try hard to de-anonymize him using different kind of techniques, from backdoor to spyware? Yes, it is. Is it possible for the government to trivially track everybody with very low cost, like they will do with the banking system? No, it's not. If you pay with if you donate with Bitcoin, your name is not there, unless you put it on the donation form. But otherwise, your name is not there. They can try to trace you if you don't use best technology practices like CoinJoin and coin control and avoiding KYC. But even that is very expensive because they have to target you. And if you do use the best practices, then it's still possible to go Assange or go or Snowden on you with the NSA satellite looking at your fingers on a keyboard. Sure, but that's very expensive. It's like, is Bitcoin confiscatable? Well, it depends. If you get to Guantanamo and get tortured for 10 years, maybe you will reveal your private keys. Okay, but that's a bit expensive to do on 7 billion people. So not that they will not want to, but they cannot do the from a cost opportunity point of view. So I would say if you donate with Bitcoin, your privacy is safe in prima facie, unless you get targeted, and then you need and the better you manage your privacy, like with CoinJoin and Coin Control, and avoiding KYC whenever you can, the better for you.
So he's brought up Assange twice, which is a really reason why one of my main functions of business exists. Because one thing that happened with Assange is when Assange got picked up at the airport, it was because they pulled his passport. If he had another passport, he would be fine right now. He would be probably hiding in some country, right? But because he only had one passport, they were able to restrict him from leaving the country. Now, Bitcoin does provide financial sovereignty, but what about physical sovereignty? I think this is very important because you can have all the Bitcoin stored safely in the world, but if they pick you up for whatever reason, the government is a monopoly on force, then we don't have any protections. So Tone, I know you know about this topic as well, but what do you think about places people should move, second citizenship, citizen by investment, residencies, places people should be looking for?
A lot of it is changing. I would look at countries that had the least amount of COVID restrictions. That's
Tanzania.
Basically my list. It's a short list. Or countries that had, even they kind of went bad, but then they did a full 180. So even a place like the UAE and Dubai, they had a strict lockdown for like a few months, and they're like, this is insane. And they stopped. The UK took them a little longer. It was insanity for like almost a year, and then they're like, okay, that's it, done. Mexico never really had it. So you want to look at those. El Salvador, same thing. Never really had anything major, and then they went, that's it, done. And then there are places like Hong Kong and Singapore that I think they'll be locked down for a decade. Australia will eventually open up, maybe. I don't know. So that would be my list. And it's not about having a bunch of passports. My view on it is a little bit different. You want to have just 1 or 2 passports, not 8. Because if you have 8 passports, you're now subject to 8 sets of laws that apply to you all over the world at the same time. So you are really breaking the law all the time in one of your passports. So my view is you try to establish as many residencies as you can. And once you maintain those residencies long enough, it's an option. It's like a call option. You can call it into a passport eventually. So have maybe 1 or 2, maybe more than 1. Have 2 or 3 passports and try to get like 8 residencies in other places where you can just live and convert them into a passport if you need it.
Well, I absolutely agree with Ton. I will just make it. I would just differ on one opinion. I think you have to match the new tendency to totalitarianism from COVID with the previous one. For example, like Belarus is a country that was perfect for COVID restriction. No COVID restriction at all for 2 years. Yet, they will not hit you because you go to protest against Trudeau, but they will hit you anyway if you go to protest against Lukashenko. So they didn't need a new excuse to become aggressive because they already were. So probably you have to balance. There is the very bad thing is that the list of countries not terrible about coronazism is not overlapping with the list of countries that were not terrible before. So I will never move to Sweden. I mean, Sweden was known to be a socialist hell with huge taxation. And now Sweden was the best in Europe for coronazism. So it's complicated. One last thing that I will add is that you should read a very old book which is pre-Bitcoin but very prophetic about Bitcoin, which is The Sovereign Individuals, that started this kind of idea of again, voting with your feet, as you were mentioning. And there are several ideas following this idea of moving around to shop, to do citizen shopping or residency shopping. One thing that these people started to theorize is the 7 flag theory. So you should have this passport.
Thought it was 5.
Oh yeah, 5, right.
Well, it's 4 now. Bitcoin took off a flag, remember?
Right, yeah, exactly.
Banking,
that was my point.
no longer needed. 4 flags now.
You made my point. You don't need to care for banking anymore. You just need to care for everything else. You still have to care for everything else, but Bitcoin fixed 1 flag.
And I think that the countries we should really be looking at...
I'm sorry. Are you saying that the metaverse is not going to fix another flag?
Who's plugging into Neuralink and sucking their body into the Matrix? Not me. Okay, so in terms of the countries that, if you can't leave the United States, obviously I'm a huge proponent for Miami, right? I need more people there who are not, who are freedom-minded. So if you guys want to stay in the U.S., Miami, Florida is doing very well, and we want to make sure that that local community there is of people who are of the like mind. And then you look at like the different regions of Florida, and what the people in power are doing there is really meant to keep Florida as a free state. Now, in terms of internationally, obviously El Salvador, they're building a citizenship by investment program in Bitcoin that they're accepting. And then South America, it's not too far, but the laws there are really turning to be beneficial. Now,
South America and Africa I believe, will be the future.
Yes. So G7 countries, the next G7 countries in this next era of the world, where do you think they are?
Well, yeah, I will agree. Africa and South America. Eastern Europe is interesting because one criteria is to go in a place where laws are good, but another is to go in places where laws are very bad and nobody cares and nobody enforces them, which is also very interesting because it's more anti-fragile. So if you go in a place where like, for example, there are
like Mexico.
Yeah, like Mexico or like Serbia or like Albania, Croatia. There are some like Eastern European,
where the government doesn't have enough money to have this very strong monopoly on
force. And also the culture is ex-Soviet cultures are immune to government propagandas. Like if you grow up in Serbia, you know that the government is lying, but as default, so you don't really care. And enforcement is very difficult, and that's better because, for example, there have been moments in which. In Switzerland, situation was worse than in Italy because in Italy, laws were very bad, but they have many places not complying. In Switzerland, laws were better, but everybody was complying like a fucking sheep. So it was very difficult to find a non-compliance island. So Africa, I think Africa is great. I mean, I struggle to imagine somebody really following laws in Africa. It's great.
I mean, I always bring up the example that there's a lot of places in the world that never put down telephone lines. and then they just immediately skipped a generation of technology and they went straight to cell phones because they didn't have the infrastructure to do so. And so looking for countries that fit that mandate is very important. Okay, so I have 2 rapid fire questions, so answer very quickly. I know you guys have big brains, so there's a lot to talk about. And then I have one more question just to leave everybody on a note of what can we do personally, because this is a decentralized movement where the individual does really matter. Okay, so first question, how low does Bitcoin go to remain bullish?
I'm not a technical analyst like Tone. I really don't understand numbers, but instinctively, if the low of this cycle is higher than the high of the last cycle, I think we're fine, because what that means, like a rule of thumb, is that the money entered the previous cycle, learned the lesson, and is not get scared by this the bearish moment. So if Bitcoin stays above not 20,000, but the equivalent of 20,000 at current purchasing power, which I guess would be around, I don't know, 27,000, I think it would be fine.
Yeah, my target is actually even lower than that. As long as Bitcoin doesn't spend more than a week below 20,000, I think everything is just fine.
Do CME gaps matter? Because there's one at like
No,
17
I don't
and
think,
one at like
no,
8.
I don't think they matter at all.
Okay. The next question is favorite projects in Bitcoin you think everyone here should take a look at and need a little bit more they need more highlighting on.
So there is some effort to do easy libraries to do Bitcoin multisig in a good way that could be used for inheritances and stuff like that. Chiara this morning told you about these 2 or 3 multisig and stuff like that. This is already possible right now, but there are even more possibilities, like having an account which is 303, so very secure, but it becomes 203 after 5 years, and it becomes 103 after 10 years. So you can use it for inheritances and stuff like that. Bitcoin can already do that from a protocol point of view, but doing that in a streamlined and a very secure way with standards, it requires libraries, best practices, and tutorials and interfaces. So it will take time, and BDK library is great for that, and stuff that companies like Spectre and Sparrow and Nunchuck are doing are very, very important.
Yeah.
And the second,
Oh, no, we're real low on time.
okay.
Real quick, name the company that you were going to say.
Spectre, Sparrow, Nunchuck.
Yeah, let's also follow Wasabi and Sparrow. And
Right. Well, other than our amazing sponsors, so check out what they do. I've never even used it, but I always push Liquid, the Liquid sidechain, because one of the reasons why shitcoins like Ethereum, like Binance Smart Chain, like OpenSea, why these things are so powerful, are because people keep building their garbage on top of them. But you can build that garbage on top of Bitcoin. And that would really suck a lot of value out of them. So Liquid sidechain, RGB, the Bitcoin sidechains. And if you really need to launch that token, I mean, at least do it on Bitcoin. At least your technology will be silent, so we can only argue the merits of your project, not the tech of your project.